Thanks for joining us on Coast to Coast Pest Talk. So, Andy's a little tired today, and he was like, oh gosh, I just want to go home and lay down. I was like, I'll do your podcast for you.
Oh, great.
Like, really? That'd be amazing. He's like, you're not joking, right? And I was like, no, let's do it. So hi.
Thanks so much, guys, for tuning in to Coast Pest Talk. I'm your host, Gabe, with Pest Patrol, joined here by a special guest, but also co-host, Holly Sanefski. Not Andy Sanefski, but Holly Sanefski, also from Syracuse, New York, with Primatech Pest Management. And Holly, why are you here and not Andy?
Andy is tired. He's taking a break. So we figured we'd surprise you. And we got a great reaction. So I'm sure he'll edit that in.
Yeah, that was great. I was like, hey, it's Holly. What do you know? So today, guys, we're going to be talking through kind of bookkeeping financials. This is a humongous topic. There's lots of different ways to go about kind of addressing it. We're going to talk through maybe some of the fears of accounting, bookkeeping-ish, and then why it's important to just keep good books. And Holly's going to share. Holly is one of the few people that really loves bookkeeping, which is weird, but she's going to kind of share some of her tips and tricks there. So would you jump us in, Holly, to you were telling a story about kind of some of your previous anxiety around accountants, etc.
For sure. So you guys know that we've been in business since 2008, and in 2008, so a little background on me. I actually have a bachelor's degree in math, and I also have a bachelor's degree in music, which seems very disparate, but it's not. They're very much related. There's a lot of logic and a lot of structure that goes into both of those fields. Something about my brain really loves that kind of structure. And, you have your degree in math, but it's not accounting. It's not, it's very theoretical for the most part. And when you're first starting in business, it can be really intimidating and a little overwhelming to admit that you don't know something.
Yeah.
Because as someone who owns a business, you're supposed to have all the answers, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so I was always terrified. I admitted to my accountant, her name was Donna, and I told her, like, 2 years in, I was like, Donna, I really like you as a person. I think you're delightful. I think you're wonderful. You're so sweet and kind and caring and generous and whatnot. But I hate coming to see you. I feel like I'm being called to the principal's office every single time I go. And she very graciously, she laughed and she was like, I'm sure a lot of people feel that way and I'm here to help. And so just having that conversation and admitting that to her, she was just very kind and reassuring. And at that point, I could receive her help.
Yeah, right.
So, and like so many things in business, right? You have to admit what you don't know so that you can overcome it and learn it. So,
Yeah. And you're saying you felt like you were being called to the principal's office in like that that you were worried that you were doing things wrong, or maybe you just were. You didn't know what you were doing on the bookkeeping side, and so you felt like everything was going to be this big, like, you're in trouble.
oh, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. I was terrified of judgment, that she was going to, I didn't think she was going to like phone me into the IRS or anything, but I definitely had
Arrest her.
It would be very hard to make money if every accountant blew in their clients. So,
Yeah.
I wasn't worried about that, but I was really concerned that she was judging my ability specifically. All these terrible stories that I was making up in my head, right? Of judgment and just being bad at my job, you know?
Right. Yeah.
And maybe that plays a little bit into my perfectionist tendencies, a little bit into my imposter syndrome, which I don't
Yep.
know if you guys have talked about, but
Oh,
real
totally. I don't think
really
we've ever
runs
actually, yeah, talked about that, but that's huge.
runs rampant in my head.
Yeah, me
And
too.
it's so funny. I was just journaling because we got this wonderful award. We're one of Central New York's the CNYBJ, so the Central New York Business Journal, Best Places to Work 2024 for in the under 15 employee category. And I
Yeah.
was like, yes, that's so exciting. And Andy got these big, like huge, logos printed on vinyl and they're up on the wall. And I'm like, oh, that's so exciting. And then I got this pit in my stomach and I'm like, what if next year we're not? Right. And I'm
Right.
like, ooh, that's my imposter syndrome. Right.
Yep.
So, true perfectionist, true imposter. And these are all the stories I'm telling myself when I'm calling my accountant and I'm like, just take my books and do what you do and you work your accounting voodoo magic and make sure that I don't, go to jail for tax evasion.
Yeah. Not for too long, like under 90 days.
Right, right. And she was always just very reassuring. And once we had that conversation, I got past my fear. And so now every time I have a question, I'm like, the first person I email is my accountant, and they are wonderful people. She did expand. And she has since retired, but the team that she left behind is equally as awesome as she is. And so I guess the long and short of this lesson is that you have to have a really open, honest, comfortable relationship with that support person, your accountant specifically. Um, because if you don't know what you don't know, you will be in trouble for tax evasion. So,
Yeah, right.
yeah.
That's a great segue. Think about when you guys were first starting out, you're kind of the small owner operator, really, really small. Um, a lot of people don't even keep books, right? Um, I mean, yeah, I know. Uh, but a lot of people literally they'll just send, they're doing 100,000 or under in sales, right? It's just them, and they just send in their sales and their bank statement to their accountant, and at the end of the year, and right, I know. Um,
It's reality. Yeah.
but yeah, that's just the reality. Why is it important, on a practical level, to keep good books and to um, keep them consistently?
Yeah. So Andy really lucked out when he married me because this is something I'm naturally inclined to want to do. And I feel like I'm pretty good at it now that I actually know how to do it. My accountant literally came and sat and was like, this is how you reconcile your books. And it was the best 2 hours I could have possibly invested in.
Yeah.
Um, and I, I will say that if you don't know how to do it yourself, if you don't have any inclination to learn how, my recommendation first of all would be to find a bookkeeper, and whether that's someone on staff or someone that you hire that does it for several companies, I would hire them to do it at least monthly, if not
Yes.
weekly. And the biggest reason why it's important to keep up on your books is so that you can manage your business. You want to know, where are you spending the money? And I'm not personally like a huge, let's, cut the bottom line and we got to trim the fat and whatever. If your business needs something, it needs something. So spend the money. But you're not going to know how much money you have to spend if your books aren't current.
Hmm.
So, and you also want to start to see trends. And Andy's the one that does a little bit more of the analysis of it. I'm the one who's responsible for just making sure they all line up, and that we're in good shape with record keeping. And then he will go through and be like, oh, well, I see on my P&L that, service supplies is this amount and insurance is this amount. And, if you're looking to make some of those cut the fat decisions, that's how you're going to do it. It's also going to inform you, can we afford a loan? Can we afford for a new truck? Can we afford to hire someone? And a lot of people will manage their business based on their bank account balance. Not
Hmm.
everybody manages their business based on, their P&L or their cash flow or um, there's a third
Balance sheet.
report that, yes, or their balance sheet.
Yeah.
So, understanding how those interplay with each other and where you can afford to extend yourself and where you maybe should be looking at making some reductions. So,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I got my start in bookkeeping working under my father-in-law at the previous company I was at, and he was huge on the importance of monitoring your financials. And yeah, I agree. Obviously, um, if you're in a season, maybe you're in a season where your business genuinely has a bunch of stuff you need to cut. Maybe you just need to cut a bunch of costs, whatever. Um, if you're not monitoring your cash flow or your P&L, right? So what are you actually making? It's going to be really, really hard to be able to track that, and you're just going to have to go off your gut, and then you're often going to make a lot of people really mad because you're going to make dumb, you know,
yeah,
why are you spending so much? You're like, well, so much compared to what, right?
right.
Um,
You had mentioned your gut.
yes,
So this is something that we find over and over and over, repeating and presenting
yeah,
itself as a theme
yeah,
in our business, and it's not always isolated to financial decisions. It's also, in that account that you feel like you're just struggling and you're getting callback after callback after callback, or you have a treatment protocol in mind and you are executing that treatment protocol, but it just feels like you're stuck in a quagmire, right?
hmm,
Having data to reflect on that rather than trusting your gut is so important. And it
yes,
can feel like, I know fuel costs were huge through, post COVID period, 2022 and 2023. Like everybody was talking about, oh, I think I might switch to electric vehicles to save money on fuel. Routing has always been a huge topic, but really came to the forefront during that period when gas prices were spiking. And it's funny because it to me, who I'm helping run the schedule and the routing and whatnot. um to me, I felt really tight, you know um but I had some technicians at the time who were like, oh, why are we zigzagging all over the place? And I'm driving here and that person's driving there and then we're crisscrossing. I'm like, I don't think, you got to look at your fuel costs and are we really increasing our fuel costs? What was interesting is, at the time, we reflected on what our fuel cost year to date was compared to the previous year and where our revenue was.
as a
And
percentage, right?
right. So what we discovered was our sales increase was a much higher increase than the
Hmm.
increase in fuel cost, even though fuel prices had increased like 40%. And I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but being able to reflect on that and go, even though fuel prices are spiking, compared to where our sales are and compared to where the market increase in fuel costs, we're in great shape, right?
Yeah, right.
So removing that gut feeling, whether it's in the field or in your finances, and being able to really look hard at what is actually happening, not how I feel, it is really important. And I
Yeah,
think
it's huge.
keeping current books really helps you do that.
Yeah, that's right. And there's so many applications to that. It's interesting because I think sometimes our gut will sometimes you're just wrong, right? There's that. But then sometimes your gut is maybe feeling something, and then and it could actually, like, oh, it seems like our fuel costs are higher, right? You're like,
Right.
well, they are higher, but your gut is not necessarily able to process all the complex data, right?
Hmm.
In and of itself. So it's like, yes, it is higher, and the sales are far higher than that, right? And it's like,
Right.
yes, that's really interesting. That's
Yeah.
great. Um, how often are you guys kind of do you do most of your books yourself, I guess?
Oh, 100%.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean,
And
my accountant does my taxes.
right,
But I've gotten to a point over the years that very few things land into the ask my accountant field.
right,
And when that situation arises, I try to nip it in the bud immediately. So my accountants are very responsive to emails. So if your accountant isn't, then definitely start looking around or have that conversation with them. Because if it's not the matter of a quick phone call or a quick email in response to your needs and requests, it should be. Um, but, I've gotten to a point where, like this spring, we added some employee benefits, and I was like, oh gosh, I don't know what account to attribute these to. And I emailed my accountant. I said, here's a situation. You're the one who's doing my taxes at the end of the year. Where do you want me to apply these to? And he gets right back to me. So, it wasn't more than 1 or 2 pay cycles, which we pay weekly. So it wasn't more than 1 or 2 weeks before I was like, nope, I got it. And now it's properly attributed, and it's attributed for the balance of the year. So it's not like I get to the end of the year and I've got 48 out of 52 payroll cycles that need to be fixed. And not only does that, ease my mind that I know that I'm doing it properly and I've learned something, and, I can employ that knowledge moving forward, but also that saves me money on my accountant doing taxes because
right,
they know that I've done it right. They're going to review it, but they don't have to go through 48 out of 52 payroll cycles and ask my accountant, ask my accountant, ask my accountant, out of that account.
yeah,
So
that's right.
it saves time and money for everyone.
Yeah, and like it's not like the accountant is not the silver bullet for bookkeeping. I remember at the previous company, we had a great accounting team, uh, and me and the kind of CEO, CFO, like we were regularly like adjusting things and like, oh, he had put this in the wrong place. It's like
Right.
that's everyone makes those mistakes. So learning how to do it on the front end is going to save a whole lot of time.
For
Yeah, that's
sure.
great. W- have we jumped much into what are some of like the dangers of not doing this?
Nightmares, night sweats, overall sense of anxiety and terror. I don't know.
Yep.
Which is a very powerful motivator.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I, I think the opposite is true. If your books aren't current, you're not making wise business choices. You're solely operating on your gut. Maybe you're spending money that you think you have that you really don't, because you
Mhm.
should, it's really should be earmarked for, say, sales tax, and you're not planning for that and earmarking for that. Um, I think you definitely run the risk of accidentally over or even under extending yourself. You feel like, oh gosh, July, we're firing on all cylinders and we're just booked up to our eyeballs and we should hire a new person, and now I have to go buy a truck and, buy all this equipment. Well, then December rolls around, and I don't know how it is in Portland, but here in central New York, January, February, it is snowpack. So, there's not a lot of calls coming in. Um, and so that money that you could have been saving and banking and earmarking for payroll for your people,
Mhm.
to sustain them through the winter so that you're not on this constant rehire cycle, well, you just blew it, and now you have to lay people off, and that sucks.
Yeah.
So, and that's just one example, I think. I mean, can
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. Yeah, I would just say the overall opportunity cost. Um, that's the main thing that comes to mind when I think of like, yeah, just you're flying blind, right?
Yeah.
You need to know. I a great example. I had hired someone. It was funny. It was this happens. So Andy and I had a conversation about what do you do with your technicians and trucks? And do you take
Mhm.
them home? Do you keep them? And we were talking about that, and I was like, oh yeah, like yeah, I pay for the guys to drive. I pay for their time from their house when they leave their house to their first stop, and then their last stop. I pay for all the time from the last stop to their house. And and Andy was kind of like, I was like, that's kind of a lot, a lot of stuff. And then you're letting them take the trucks home, so all the mileage and all the gas and stuff. And I was
That's
like,
very
yeah,
generous.
yeah. And I was like, yeah, it's not that big of a deal. And then I hired somebody that lived an hour away from my city.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I was paying them like 20 overtime hours a week just to drive to and from their house.
Yeah.
And thankfully, I had some level of a pulse on my P&Ls, and so I ran a payroll. I ran another payroll, and I'm like, wait a second. My
Yeah.
labor is really high. Why is my labor this high? Like my labor is like $2,500 higher than it normally is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was
Well,
like, oh, it's because of
and to
that.
be paying overtime
I
on
was, yeah,
that.
it's like overtime on non-productive time. It was like,
Right.
oh,
Yeah.
um, and so I was very quickly like, I repent, Andy. I'm not doing that anymore. And I made that pivot. But if you don't have eyes on your financials, I mean, I guess you would just run out of money. But
Yeah.
but
Well,
it
maybe.
yeah, maybe.
Well, or you have to clutch for that. So maybe that is something that you are capable of providing to an employee, but you have to account for that 2 hour commute time in order to keep them in the 40-hour time frame, right?
Right.
So
Yes.
now
Exactly.
suddenly instead of being 8 hours worth of work, they're being six
6
hours
hours
worth
worth
of
of product.
productive.
Yep.
Right.
That's right.
And you have to account for lunch and breaks and all that. So really, as you're like slowly whittling down their productive time, and if you can make it work, great. Um, it would be much easier, in my opinion, to have someone who was a little closer to home.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, totally.
or come
Absolutely.
up with some other sort of compromise.
Yes.
So,
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
probably a lot of people would be interested in how that plays into your accounts receivable. I know that's a huge topic within the industry. And, uh, you know, yes, I keep bumping the mic. I'm sorry. Um, and that's huge. I mean, I don't know how your system is, but I have a handful of commercial customers that like to pay ACH, and I don't always get that email that is, "Hey, you have a payment on the way." And some do, some don't, but keeping an eye on my check register and regularly keeping an eye on those online accounts, you notice those little things.
Mhm.
When a payment goes overdue and you're like, oh yeah, that's an ACH payment, I should check that. And when you're doing that, once, twice, three times a week, or on a consistent basis, it's a lot easier to catch that. And then, you're not going to tick off the customer by sending them an open invoice that they're like, I already paid this. It just,
Mhm.
again, it goes back to saving everybody time and effort.
I just about 6 weeks ago hired a part-time bookkeeper for us. Because I would literally, especially during busy season, I would go 4 months without doing my books. And
Been there.
yeah,
I have
um,
done that.
and then you would go and you would cram and catch up, and then but it's like by that point, we talk about flying blind. You're flying blind. Like you have no you have you're I guess you're opening your eyes once every 4 months,
Yeah.
right?
And then you immediately want to squeeze them shut again.
You're like, oh no,
Yeah.
put the
And
blindfold back on. Yeah.
hide under your
Uh,
bed.
and it's been so nice. I mean, he logs in a couple times a month. He updates everything, and then I get P&L for the previous month at the beginning of it every month. It's like super smooth. He does a great job. Like he loves the work. He's like he loves being a bookkeeper.
Yeah.
I'm like, you're crazy, but
Yeah.
I'm glad that you love that.
Well, and let's just take a moment to acknowledge that that is awesome delegating.
Well, I
You
mean, we'll
know,
find out. Maybe it's terrible delegating. Theoretically, it's awesome.
well, and again, going back to the idea that as a business owner, when you start your business, you feel like you're expected to know everything, to be good at everything. And so much of it is, you're learning on the fly, you're learning as you go and recognizing that. And I'm working with a leadership coach now, and some of the things that I'm learning about myself is it is okay to hand something off to someone else. It doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to do it. And if there's someone that loves doing what you hate, it is a-okay. Your job is to oversee it, make sure that it doesn't go off the rails. But if bookkeeping is not your forte, if, having those difficult conversations with as a manager is not what you love to do, and you have that opportunity to, or yeah, there's like all sorts of different things that may not be in your wheelhouse. It's okay to take that and hand it to someone, especially if it's something that they just love doing.
Yeah.
Like, if most people would probably be really happy to just be like, here's my books, here you go. For me, you have to pry it out of my cold, dead hands. That's going to be one of the very last things that I, as a growing business manager, pass off. Like, I it's an aspect of my job that I really love. So it's good that you have a bookkeeper that loves it. And as
Yeah.
long as you're kind of reviewing his work, I think that that's a really great arrangement. So I would encourage people
Yeah.
to do that.
Yeah, totally. And I think something that I realized with that is, especially for us small guys, you can, if you're like me and you hate bookkeeping but you need to keep a pulse on your books, which you do,
Yeah.
um, it's not that expensive to get a
Yeah.
part-time bookkeeper, especially if they're really good at it. Um, you know, you're looking at, I mean, well under $1,000 a month. Um, and if they do a great job, then yeah.
So now it's my turn to ask you a question.
Yeah.
Freeing up that time that you not only did you dread, right? Or maybe dread is not the right word, but was not your favorite task.
No,
And
dread is the right word.
so freeing up that time to refocus on aspects of your business that not only you love but you feel really good at, what are some of the benefits you've seen from that? I mean, I have to imagine that it has improved just your general attitude, but also improved your productivity in various aspects of your business. So
Yeah.
fire away.
Yeah, and I would say, one of the cool things has been, like we talked about, just having way more of a pulse on the health of the company, which is just really cool. It gives a lot more satisfaction in any of the work I'm doing, and a lot more feeling of, um, control sounds weird, but more of a feel of that you have your hands on the right levers, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
The ship is you've got your hand on the steering wheel, right?
Yeah.
Um,
You're
so
not like
that
eating a fry with one and checking the map with the well,
that's
people
right.
don't use paper
Like
maps anymore, but like
driving a
checking your
stick
text.
shift, you know.
Right.
Yeah, my dad would always say he'd be eating a Big Mac with a milkshake
Steering
and
with the
driving a
knee.
stick shift at the
Oh my,
like, I don't know how he did
yeah.
that.
I don't
Uh,
know either. You're using your elbow to shift. That's what it is.
something. Or the burger, you're just but but,
Dad, how come the shifter is so sticky?
yeah. And that's why
Uh,
there's milkshake all over the driver's seat.
right, right.
Um, so that was a big thing. Um, but I would say I don't know if I've really again, we're just deep in busy season right now, so
Sure.
my time again, that's the crazy thing is with bookkeeping at our size, it doesn't take very much time.
Right,
It really doesn't. And so it's not like I had, oh man, there's 20 hours a month that now I have back.
right,
It's like, it was like 8 hours a month,
right.
which is considerable.
Sure.
But that's been completely like we hired a new guy. So I'm out training him basically full time. So I'm like, that has been, I like didn't even notice the,
Yeah. Right, right.
but it's
But
great. It's really nice though.
at the same time, though, I think that having that weight off your
Yes.
mind, I'm sure frees up that headspace so that you can think about, okay, you know, I don't remember your new guy's name.
Albert.
Yes. So now you don't have this nagging sensation in
Hmm.
the back of your mind that, oh shoot, I got to stay up until midnight tonight to keep the books up and make sure that I'm dotting my i's and crossing my t's, and now I don't have that 30 minutes to think about. I have a call coming in to do an inspection to provide an estimate. Well, now you can, instead of just slapping a number on the page because you're like, I'm just so busy, just give them anything. You can actually think about that, and you
Yes.
don't have that nagging in the back of your brain going, but the books, the books, the books. And
Yep.
yeah,
That's right.
so
No, yeah, absolutely. And I would say like a really tangible, um, like I'm considering now in the last 8 weeks for the first time ever seriously considering getting into a commercial space because we've never had a commercial space, right? Um, and I think that a large aspect of that has been just having that consistent, okay, you're consistently seeing where's my cash flow at, where's my P&L at. And you're like, okay, we can, now we're halfway into the year. We see the trends of what the year is going to look like this is good. We could actually start looking at that. And I would say that if I didn't have a good pulse on my financials right now, I don't think I would be, I think I would still need to get into a space, but I would be a lot more hesitant to even
sure.
look. So,
Yeah, for sure.
so
Well, and
just the
then
ability to even want to take those risks in the
sure,
future.
sure. Well, and again, having the headspace to wrap your brain around signing, do I have the time to search for a location? Do I have time to build a relationship with a real estate agent, or with if you're renting, you're going to have to check in with the property managers and whatnot. And,
Hmm.
um, you know, having that informed headspace, but also the freedom to be like, okay, I think I can do this. And, I have enough capacity in my brain to visualize what that would look like, and be okay with, yup, this is the direction that I want to go, and like you said, be more confident. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and there's a lot of life principles in that. I think even just the importance of delegation, like
Uh-huh.
you were saying.
Yep.
Yeah, that's clearing up your own mental headspace is pretty vital.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
Cool. That's
Well, and
great.
I'm super bummed that I can't think of that other thing that I was thinking about. I'm telling you, 2 in the morning, it'll strike me, which will be 11 o'clock your time. So maybe I will
There you go.
text you.
There you go. Yeah, well, Andy always tells me about all the like he solves all the world's problems at 3 a.m. in his sleep. So like it's
And
a rough life.
he does too. Well, I've started instituting a practice now where he's not allowed to wake up and roll over and immediately start talking about work. I'm like, wait, morning. And he's like, oh, yeah, good morning. Okay, now we can solve the world problems.
That's great.
So
That's awesome. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. Guys, thanks so much for tuning in again to another episode of Coast to Coast Pest Talk. What a fun, awesome episode, talking through bookkeeping and got into some like leadership delegation stuff at the end there. As always, join our LinkedIn Coast to Coast Pest Talk group and interact with us there. And Holly, thanks so much for jumping in and covering for Andy today.
Surprise. Thanks for having me. Thanks for being a good sport.